Hey guys, what's going on? It's Colin here again, back with another fan video. I know it's been a while. A couple weeks ago I kind of ran out of my stockpile, and I just have been really busy these last 2 weeks. So on my February break now I figured I'd crank a couple of these out for you guys because I've been doing a lot of engine videos recently. So anyways, this is a Hunter Century 10-inch 2-speed oscillating table fan. It is a type F-10, cat number 650 and serial number of B27221. Obviously 110 volts, 60 cycles, 0.75 amps, made by Hunter Fan and Ventilating Corporation, Fulton NY, alternating current, and made in the USA. So this was actually an antique store find. Going back about 5 years here, I discovered a new antique shop in town. So I went in and started to take a look. It was a really small place, and I didn't really find much. But I asked the guy, he said, do you ever get like antique fans in? Because I'm kind of into collecting and fixing them. And he said, oh yeah, all the time, which is what what they always say. But then he said, let me take your number down, and I'll text you if I ever get any. So I gave him my number, and sure enough, about a week and a half later, I got a text saying, here, I got 3 fans, and you want to come take a look? So I said, sure. So I ran down there, and there were 3 table fans there, of 3 different sizes actually. There was probably a 6-inch, I forget exactly how big it is, it's probably like a 6-inch dime store fan, which I'm guessing is from the 20s or the 30s. I don't actually have a brand on that one. I know in the base it says VP-1000, and I'm pretty sure at some point I looked it up and was able to find out what that meant, but I can't remember now. That one, I actually got it home the night of and had it running. All it needed was some oil and a new cord. And it's a pretty simple little fan, but it's a good one. The reason I haven't done a video on it yet is because the motor needs a rewind, which I've known about for a while. I've just been too scared to do it. The motor's been sitting on my desk for like a month. Actually, probably longer than that. But I just got myself a metal lathe, so I'm hoping that once I get that up and running, I'll be able to use that to make some coils by turning really slowly and being able to feed in some wire. I'm going to attempt to do it myself at some point. But next up was a 12-inch 3-speed oscillating gray bar fan, which may have even had brass blades, I don't remember. It was a brushed motor, but I found out very quickly that that one was going to be over my head in terms of what I was capable of the time. The speed coil was shot, which meant it was going to be expensive to get that rewound, and I couldn't even get the motor to run. So that ended up being traded with Mr. Whiskey Lizard, aka Mike Mirren, for a different fan. And then there was this thing, which I think only a couple days afterwards I had running as well. This one needed a bit more work than the little dime store fan. Obviously it needed the standard rewire and motor service, but I quickly found out that after running it for a little bit that something wasn't quite right, because it almost had like a stiff spot in the rotation where if you put like the fan blade like there and went to start it, it would start, but then if you put it over by the stiff spot and you went to turn it on, it would not start unless you gave it a little bump with your finger. What I later found out was the front bearing down in there was excessively worn to the point where this was sitting in such a low spot, like this whole blade would move up and down a noticeable amount, and it would get stuck in a spot and it wouldn't have the torque to start. This fan doesn't have a lot of torque behind it to begin with, so it just didn't have enough to start. So I contacted my friend who's a machinist and said, hey, can you make me a new bearing for this? And he said, sure. And then I made the mistake of saying, okay, great, just get to it whenever you can, no rush. Well, that took about a year and a half to get, which was alright because I had plenty of other projects. I'm not complaining or anything. He did an amazing job with the bearing. It was just kind of funny. So in the meantime, I started tackling the cosmetic restoration of this thing, and that took a grand total of 3 years to get right. Basically, what kept happening is I stripped the whole thing, I painted it, it looked great, and if you rubbed your fingernail on it like that, it would scratch. And then I would get really pissed off, I think you can understand why, and it would sit, and I'd say, you know what, let me try that again. Same thing would happen, get pissed off, it would sit. So finally, at some point, I said, this is stupid, I'm going to do this right, and I'm going to use heavy enamel paint, you know, real tough stuff, and do it right with primer and whatnot, And finally, I got a good surface. Ooh, that's really dusty. This fan sits on like a server type thing in my dining room. It fits really well, but it hasn't been run in a while, so those blades are a little dusty. But the restoration is by no means perfect. It is no Alex Rushing special, but it is more than good enough for me, and I'm happy with it. So that's all that really matters. It is not a museum piece, but it does look pretty good, especially from a distance, and I'm very happy with it. And most importantly, it is functional. But there you go. What I later learned after talking to some people and whatnot, this kind of came out with a kind of texture on it, and I wasn't sure why. And that's just because I just stripped this and wire wheeled it and whatnot. I did not sand it at all. So now I know going forward for the next restoration, after I do that, I should really sand the metal to smooth it out a bit, because this whole paint job is a little bit textured, but that's alright. Adds a little depth to it. But here's the rear. I ended up rewiring this with all like cloth covered cord. And I really do like the look of it. I do still have to get a grommet in there. I am aware of that. But like I said, this fan sits stationary more than it oscillates. So yeah. The wiring on this one was actually a bit tricky. You can probably see there's some shrink tubing coming out the back there, because there really wasn't a whole lot to work with on the stator on this fan in terms of the head wire. So unfortunately, I had to let it stick out the back a little bit, but normally you can't see that. I'm just pointing it out. These fans are interesting. The oscillator is, at least. You have this little lever here that's brass and it says off, and then you flip it over, and that like slides a whole shaft in here over, and that's what engages it, and you can see it says on there. Got your oil ports there, and there's one in the front up over there. I learned the hard way that these rear covers are pot metal and they do crumble, because this one just kind of fell apart on me one day. Luckily it's not too bad, but just gotta be careful about that. I didn't realize that when I picked it up, but something I am proud of is this badge. This badge was a mess when I got it, so what I ended up doing was I took the whole thing and I completely painted the whole thing, and I was able to sand it down to get the paint off the high spots, and then I polished it, and I think that looked really good, and I really like the way that looks. But yeah, overall I'm pretty happy with it. It's a good fan. Like I said, the cloth wire here. There you go. And my typical semi-old style plug on there. It's actually just a hardware store special, but it looks old enough for me. And they work. But anyways, what do you say we fire this thing up? So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can capture a startup sound here, and we'll fire it up on high. Of course the boiler turns on right as I'm going to do that, so I'll have to record the startup sound in a little bit because you guys aren't going to be able to hear that. But alright, let's go for a startup. Here's high. I really do like those slide switches, by the way. I don't know what it is. I think they're just because they're so mechanical and whatnot. I love them, but I'm just going to move this over here. They are cool. Fan does have a slight vibration. Blades are probably slightly out of balance. But I don't have the tools that are really necessary to make that right. To be completely honest, you use like a stroboscope and whatnot. I don't have that stuff. So it's good enough. It doesn't vibrate off the table. But otherwise, it's a very smooth running fan. It moves a lot of air too for its size, and it's nice and quiet. You can see I have like a paper towel and a bit here, just so you can see. There you go. Moves a really strong amount of air. Go ahead and flip this around and put it on oscillation. Or engage the oscillations. It does a pretty decent sweep. I just find it odd that it's not really symmetrical with regards to the base and the switch. It's like it comes to like here and then it will go all the way over like that. So I don't entirely know why that is, but it works. We're good down to low here. With the noise of that boiler, you probably won't even be able to hear this thing. But trust me, it's pretty quiet. and it's still throwing out a really good amount of air. You also have to consider that this is a 10-inch fan. I mean, just to give you an idea, we're going to go all the way back here, standing about 20 feet away from this, and I still feel the breeze like almost as strong as if I was standing right in front of it. We go even further back, now 30 feet away from the thing, and I can still feel it on low speed. So there you go. Ignore the messy shop. We're always working on, my dad and I are always working on something down here. Not much time to clean up. But let's go back to high here and we'll do a spin down, and then as soon as that boiler shuts off, I'll get you guys a startup sound. So here we go. Spin down's pretty good. It's not like the best. I think that the front bearing here is still a tad on the tight side, because when he machined it, when my friend machined it, he made it a little bit on the tight side, so it's just kind of been wearing in. And this fan doesn't get run all that much, but yeah, it's still pretty decent, I'd say. There is a decent amount of end slop in this. I just realized I'll have to put some fiber washers in it at some point. But there you go. There's the little Hunter Century F-10. If anybody has any info on this fan, let me know, because I'd like to know a little more about it. I don't even know what year this thing was made. I'm guessing the 30s or the 20s maybe. But again, if anybody knows, let me know. I'd like to learn a bit about it. I'd like to know the facts and trivia behind my fans as well. But anyways, I'll get you guys a startup sound here in a second, and then we'll conclude the video. Alright, the boiler just shut off, so let's get a startup sound on high. It's a tad soft in the beginning, but then it kind of winds up and gets louder. It's got a cool sound, but now you can finally hear just how loud this fan actually is. That is to say, not very loud at all. But a little more accurate of a representation, I guess. But shut her down, and then we'll do a startup sound on low. Alright, and let's go to low. I'd say it's a little less pronounced on low, but again, that's about how loud this fan is. Pretty darn quiet, especially compared to today's fans, and today's fans of this size, you would not feel a breeze on low speed from 30 feet away. But there you go. So yeah, overall I'm very happy with this fan. I'm glad I finally got it right. There is one other fan. It's a very different fan, but there's one other fan that has the same story in terms of the restoration, which I still haven't finished, because shortly after I did this one, I said, oh, you know what, I should finish that one up too, and guess what, the paint got screwed up, and now I'm pissed again. So and then it turned to winter, so maybe this summer I'll finish a 4-year-long restoration on that fan. But yeah, these things kind of happen sometimes, where things end up dragging on longer than you'd like, but what are you going to do? So anyways, guys, thank you all for watching. If you like what you see, hit the little like and subscribe buttons. I'd appreciate that. By all means, leave a comment if you have one, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.